big man that scouts drooled over, capable of running the floor, blocking shots, and scoring with a soft touch. When you look back at the draft evaluations, reporters noted at the time that Tarpley was the exact missing piece a rising team needed to compete for a championship. But the draft process is funny, and it can expose things people prefer to keep quiet. Why did a player with consensus top-tier, once-in-a-generation talent slip down the board on draft night? As some outlets claimed during early career retrospectives, a few front offices quietly backed away because of character concerns and whispers about his off-court lifestyle. The Dallas Mavericks decided the talent was just too undeniable to pass up. In the 1986 NBA draft, he was officially selected 7th overall by Dallas per official draft records. The franchise was thrilled. They already had a solid core with Mark Aguirre, Rolando Blackman, and Sam Perkins. Adding a young giant like Tarpley to the mix made them look like a team perfectly built to challenge the mighty Lakers and Rockets in the Western Conference. But even as the Mavericks celebrated landing their franchise savior, a shocking public admission in the press was about to derail the honeymoon phase before it truly began. When Tarpley stepped onto an NBA floor, the transition looked absolutely effortless. He came off the bench during his rookie campaign, learning the professional game without the crushing pressure of carrying the team on his back every single night. He was an instant contributor, crashing the glass and protecting the rim. Throughout his 1986 to 1987 rookie season, he averaged 7.5 points and 7.1 rebounds in limited minutes, per official league statistics. Those numbers were more than enough to earn him all-rookie honors and validate the front office's decision to draft him. The future in Dallas looked incredibly bright. Then the narrative took a sudden and painful turn. The team was preparing for his highly anticipated sophomore year, expecting him to take a massive leap forward. But that month, the press was writing about a situation that had absolutely nothing to do with basketball. According to major sports media reports, in October 1987, Tarpley made his first public disclosure of his battles with banned substances and alcohol. The announcement sent shockwaves through the organization. Who was around Tarpley when these habits started to take over? And why did he choose that specific moment in the fall to suddenly sit in front of microphones and reveal a deeply destructive dependency? The revelation forced him to step away from the team to enter a rehabilitation center, leaving the Mavericks organization holding its breath. The league was already hypersensitive to reputation issues during this era, and now a high-profile lottery pick was openly admitting to severe off-court struggles just months into his professional career. It was a sobering reality check for a fan base that had just been dreaming of a championship parade. Despite this alarming off-court confession, his return to the hardwood would produce a 1987 to 1988 season so statistically dominant, it forced the league to temporarily look the other way. When Tarpley came back from treatment, he played with a chip on his shoulder and a fire that terrified opposing front courts. The coaching staff decided to keep him in a reserve role to manage his transition back into the lineup, but do not let the bench label fool you. He was playing starter minutes and closing out tight games. In the 1987 to 1988 season, he secured the 6th Man of the Year award by averaging 13.5 points and 11.8 rebounds per archived regular season statistics. Television coverage at the time focused on his relentless, game-changing energy. He was outplaying established veterans and Hall of Famers almost every time he laced up his sneakers. But looking back, a heavy question hangs over that remarkable run. How was a player actively battling severe private demons able to physically manhandle some of the greatest centers in basketball history on the biggest stage? The Mavericks were not just a good regular season team, they were legitimate contenders. They fought their way through the playoffs and marched straight into a showdown with the legendary Showtime Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. Against Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Magic Johnson, Tarpley was an absolute revelation. He was everywhere at once, grabbing every loose ball and finishing fiercely at the rim. During that 1988 Western Conference Finals, he punished the defending champions by averaging 15.9 points and 13 rebounds, according to playoff box scores. Dallas pushed Los Angeles to a grueling 7-game series. and Tarpley looked every bit like the future face of the league. Tarpley had seemingly conquered the basketball world, but his rapidly increasing statistical peak coincided with a disastrous loss of control behind closed doors that would soon involve the police and a devastating suspension. Coming off the massive high of a deep playoff run, the expectations surrounding the Mavericks and their star big man were absolutely through the roof. The start of the 1988 to 1989 season felt like the launching pad for a new NBA dynasty. When he was actually on the floor, the raw talent was undeniable, and he proved he could take over games single-handedly. On November 9, 1988, he erupted for a career-high 35 points and 17 rebounds against the Phoenix Suns, per official NBA box scores. He was moving with power and finesse, looking every bit like a man ready to carry a franchise for the next decade. But behind the scenes, the foundation was starting to crack. The Dallas front office was quietly wrestling with a nightmare scenario. They were trying to manage and protect a generational player whose off-court lifestyle was reportedly becoming more erratic by the week. Injuries began to pile up, causing him to miss long stretches of action, but the injuries were only part of the story. Reporters noted at the time that management seemed increasingly anxious about his daily whereabouts and routines. What changed internally after his massive breakout playoff series, and why did the story stop being just about basketball so soon after his greatest triumph? The flashes of brilliance became frustratingly brief. In the 1988 to 1989 season, he played only 19 games but managed a dominant 17.3 points per game, according to official player archives. The production was staggering given how little he played, proving that his basketball instincts were still razor-sharp even as his personal life unraveled. The Mavericks brass held their breath, hoping his raw talent could somehow outrun his lifestyle, until a fateful night on a Dallas highway shattered the illusion completely. That illusion broke violently just as a new season was getting underway, forever altering how older, loyal fans viewed the franchise's brightest star. The gritty, team-first identity of the Dallas Mavericks took a severe hit when the smiling, energetic sixth man was suddenly making headlines for all the wrong reasons. In November 1989, just 6 games into the season, he was arrested for driving under the influence and resisting arrest, according to public police records. This was no longer just a private struggle or a quiet rehabilitation stint. It was a highly public legal conflict. Court records showed that the situation escalated quickly, turning what might have been a standard traffic stop into a massive public relations and legal crisis. Why did this happen at exactly the start of a new campaign? And how did the league's suspension policy suddenly begin to tighten like a noose around his career? The NBA, under the leadership of David Stern, was heavily focused on cleaning up the league's image during this era, and they moved swiftly. He was immediately handed an indefinite suspension, forcing him away from the team and the game he dominated. For months, his career hung in the balance as the league evaluated his status. Eventually, the front office and the fans got the news they were desperately hoping for. By January 1990, he was officially reinstated by the NBA after serving his initial suspension, according to league press releases. Given a seemingly gracious second chance, Tarpley returned to the floor with a vengeance, but the clock was already ticking toward a spring 1991 arrest that would severely test the league's patience. When the 1990 to 1991 season tipped off, it brought a tantalizing, almost heartbreaking glimpse of what could have been. For a brief shining moment, the dominant center was back in the paint, reminding every team in the Western Conference exactly why he was considered unguardable. During the 1990 to 1991 season, he averaged a massive 20.4 points and 11 rebounds across just 5 games, per official statistics. He was putting up MVP-caliber numbers, effortlessly asserting his will around the basket. But the physical output was a mirage hiding a deeply rooted, untreated issue. The Dallas organization could not shield him from the reality of his destructive dependency forever. Television coverage at the time focused heavily on the stark contrast between his incredible, undeniable on-court dominance and the escalating chaos of his personal life. Why did that second arrest surface right when he was playing the most dominant basketball of his life? And who behind the scenes decided that enough was finally enough? The answer came swiftly from the league office. In April 1991, he was suspended indefinitely again after being arrested for a second time while driving under the influence, according to major newspaper reports. This was a crushing blow to the Mavericks organization and to the fan base that had rooted so hard for his recovery. The leniency of the past was gone, replaced by a rigid zero-tolerance reality. With 2 strikes on his record in David Stern's newly disciplined NBA, Tarpley was forced into an impossible corner where one single missing test meant the end of everything. The zero-tolerance era of the early 90s NBA was completely unforgiving, especially when a player found himself standing on his final strike. The league and the Mavericks had tried suspensions, rehabilitation stints, and public warnings, but the destructive dependency gripping their star center proved too powerful to manage quietly. In October 1991, he violated league policy by explicitly refusing to take a mandatory substance test, according to league disciplinary documentation. It was a staggering decision that left the Dallas front office completely paralyzed. Reporters noted at the time that walking away from a mandatory screening was essentially an automatic admission of guilt under the rigid collective bargaining agreement. Why did he refuse the test on that specific date? And did the league purposefully use his massive profile to send a terrifying message to the rest of the NBA locker rooms? Some sources argued that David Stern's office made a high-profile example out of him to clean up the league's image, while others disputed it, pointing out that the rules were simply absolute and clearly defined. There was no room left for negotiation. The gavel came down with historic severity. On October 17, 1991, he was officially banned from the league for life, per press conference transcripts. Tarpley went from being the cornerstone of a Western Conference contender to a cautionary tale overnight. The Mavericks had to figure out how to replace a once-in-a-generation talent, while Tarpley had to figure out how to survive without the only career he had ever known. Exiled from the only league that mattered and labeled a pariah in the United States, Tarpley had no choice but to pack his bags and chase a $1.25 million payday across the Atlantic. Basketball overseas in the early 90s was a completely different world, and for a disgraced American star, it offered a rare, lucrative sanctuary. Far from the glaring spotlight of the American press, he found a place where his reputation was secondary to his ability to grab rebounds and anchor a defense. For the 1992 to 1993 season, he signed a massive 2-year contract for $1.25 million with Eris, according to European sports media. He was stepping into one of the most intense basketball environments on the planet. Television coverage at the time focused on the absolute frenzy he caused in Greece, playing to packed, smoke-filled arenas where fanatic crowds treated him like visiting royalty. But the immediate question was obvious. How did a man exiled for a total lack of discipline manage to stay reportedly focused and highly productive in a completely foreign, high-pressure environment far away from his usual support systems? He answered by quietly putting his head down and letting his game do the talking. He dominated the paint for Aris and later Olympiacos, proving to international scouts that his physical gifts had not vanished. He helped his team secure the prestigious Saporta Cup and controlled the glass against the best big men Europe had to offer. During the 1994 EuroLeague competition, he led the entire tournament in rebounds with 12.8 per game, per International Basketball Archives. He was playing like a man with something to prove, staying out of the headlines for the wrong reasons and reminding everyone just how dominant he could be when he simply focused on the hardwood. His dominant overseas resurgence caught the attention of the very people who had written him off, setting the stage for a 1994 front office decision no one thought the league would ever allow. In professional sports, world-class talent always tempts the people writing the checks, even when history insists it is a bad idea. After watching him dominate overseas and reportedly stay on a clean path, the NBA reconsidered its ultimate punishment. In 1994, he was officially reinstated by the NBA and signed a new multi-year contract to return to Dallas, per sports agency records. It was an unprecedented second chance that shocked the basketball world. According to public documents surrounding his return, the reinstatement was heavily conditional, requiring him to adhere to an incredibly strict zero-tolerance aftercare program just to keep his uniform. What specific legal and personal assurances did the Mavericks demand before handing millions of dollars to a previously permanently banned player? The front office gambled that a humbled Tarpley, older and fresh off a successful European run, was finally ready to be a reliable professional veteran. The immediate return to Dallas was full of hope, and the older fans welcomed him back, remembering the playoff magic of his early years. He still possessed brilliant basketball instincts, but the wear and tear of a grueling international schedule and years of intense personal battles were visible. He was a step slower, relying more on positioning than raw athleticism. Still, his production was solid. In the 1994 to 1995 season, he successfully played 55 games, averaging 12.6 points and 8.2 rebounds according to official NBA statistics. It seemed like the ultimate redemption story had finally been written, but behind the scenes, the rigid, unforgiving terms of his court-imposed aftercare program were becoming a fatal trap that would soon trigger another permanent expulsion. The comeback felt like a miracle, but miracles in professional sports often come with heavy fine print. The league had welcomed him back, but the aftercare program he was forced to sign was completely uncompromising. There was zero margin for error. Reporters noted at the time that the terms of his reinstatement were incredibly restrictive, demanding total abstinence and regular monitoring to maintain his professional eligibility. What exactly triggered the fatal violation that ended his NBA life overnight? One version says it was something as simple as a single beer, a momentary lapse in judgment that officially crossed the unbending line drawn by the league office. The NBA did not hesitate, and they did not offer another hearing. In December 1995, he was permanently banned from the NBA for using alcohol and violating the strict terms of his aftercare, according to league disciplinary files. The decision was swift, merciless, and absolutely final. It closed the door on his American major professional basketball career forever. When the dust finally settled, he capped his entire NBA tenure at just 280 career games, a shockingly low total per historical basketball archives, considering his immense physical talent and early dominance. He was supposed to be the man anchoring the Dallas Mavericks for a decade, but instead he became a cautionary tale about the fragile nature of an athletic prime. Cast out of the league permanently, a humbled Tarpley had to figure out how to keep a paycheck coming in, pushing him toward a desperate decade-long journey through basketball's obscure minor leagues. When the NBA shuts its doors on you permanently, the basketball world suddenly gets very small, and the gyms get a whole lot quieter. But Tarpley still needed to earn a living, and he still possessed the sheer size and fundamental skill that teams around the globe were willing to pay for. He embarked on a grueling nomadic global tour, bouncing from the Continental Basketball Association to the United States Basketball League, and making distant stops in China and Russia. According to International League records, during the 1999 to 2000 season, he traveled overseas again to play for Ural Great in Russia. It was a far cry from the bright lights of Reunion Arena in Dallas or the legendary battles against the Lakers. According to Basketball Archives, his international and minor league coaches often praised his professionalism during this stretch, noting how hard he worked despite his circumstances. But the situation naturally invited questions. What drove a former multi-millionaire to grind through obscure leagues in his late 30s? And how did his massive reputation precede him in these smaller basketball circles? He kept pushing his body, chasing the game from town to town until his physical frame simply could not take any more punishment. In the 2005 to 2006 season, he played for the Michigan Mayhem in the CBA before suffering a severe season-ending hand injury, according to minor league press coverage. The injury quietly closed the book on his physical playing days, forcing him off the hardwood for good. But even as he walked away from the court for the last time, Tarpley was preparing to launch an unprecedented legal attack on the very institution that had banned him. Fighting the NBA in federal court is not a battle most former players are equipped to win, especially those whose careers ended under a cloud of controversy. But Tarpley, carrying the heavy weight of his unfulfilled potential, decided to challenge the very foundation of his permanent ban. In September 2007, he filed a discrimination lawsuit against the Dallas Mavericks and the NBA, according to federal court records. The legal argument was incredibly controversial and caught the sports world off guard. His legal team argued that his severe dependency was a protected medical disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act, rather than just a punishable behavioral choice. Court records showed the lawsuit demanded immense compensation for lost wages, arguing that the league's refusal to reinstate him after his final recovery efforts was fundamentally discriminatory. Why did this massive legal challenge surface over a decade after his final ban, and what secret financial struggles reportedly forced him to take David Stern's league to federal court? As some reports claimed, the financial realities of his post-basketball life were catching up to him, pushing him to seek whatever restitution he could find to secure his future. The league, naturally wanting to avoid a highly publicized trial that could challenge the core of their zero-tolerance policies, chose to handle the matter quietly behind closed doors. By January 2009, the lawsuit was settled out of court per legal filings and public documents. He won a quiet settlement and a measure of financial peace, but no court order could give him back the prime athletic years he lost to the bottle. When the legal battles finally faded and the settlement money was secured, the story of Roy Tarpley grew quiet. Out of the national spotlight, away from the roaring crowds of Reunion Arena and the fierce international gyms of Greece, he lived a relatively private life in Texas. But the human body keeps a meticulous ledger, and the physical toll of his long destructive dependency could not be settled in a courtroom. On January 9, 2015, he passed away at age 50 in Arlington, Texas, according to major sports media reports. The sudden finality of it sent a wave of genuine sorrow through the older generations of the basketball world. When the news broke, television coverage at the time focused heavily on the heartbroken reactions of his former Mavericks teammates and coaches, who remembered a soft-spoken, incredibly gifted teammate rather than the troubled figure portrayed in the headlines. But listening to those tributes immediately raised a painful, lingering question. In retrospect, did the league's heavy-handed zero-tolerance policies fail a man who desperately needed medical intervention, or did Roy Tarpley simply throw away a golden ticket that millions could only dream of? The debate remains unresolved, an uncomfortable gray area in the history of professional basketball. When you look at his statistical footprint, the reality of what was lost becomes staggering. He left behind exactly 2,803 total NBA rebounds per official archives.